Why why are you a deist?
That's a good question.
Are we just going to leave it at that?
Does that mean you don't have a good answer for that?
Doesn't it speak for itself?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it just depends on the person. They could say that's a good question, and here's the answer. Or that's a good question. I've never considered it. Or it's a good question. I don't have an answer. Yada yada, so forth and so on.
I don't know. I just find it hard to swallow. No homosexuality intended written. I really should stop with those innuendos. I apologize.
No, keep them coming. I know where your mind's at. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know you're highly sensitive. You pick these things up like mad. So let me try to use some other expressions. Yes. So it's strange. It strains credulity for me to come to the conclusion that the universe is purely random, brought about by chance plus time, and there's no purpose behind it, no meaning behind it, uh, and so forth and so on. It's hard for me to believe, and moreover, there seems to be no evidence to suggest that's the case.
Well, aren't you asserting that if not God, then random? Like what reason do you have to assume that there's any randomness?
Well, logically speaking, there's only two possible conclusions. Either God exists or God does not exist. Either there's meaning and purpose or there's no meaning and purpose, so forth and so on. Either the world is intelligible or is it not intelligible, or either the world is absurd or it's not absurd. I choose to believe that the world is intelligible, that it has meaning, and that it has purpose. And there's something more to it than time plus chance.
Well, I mean, I don't know, you're kind of saying a lot of weird stuff, but you're seeming to say that God makes the universe not random, and therefore anything that happens is non-random. And it just seems like a kind of a catch-all, right? Like if I was to pick a rock up and let it go, it wouldn't randomly fall. But would you say that it necessarily means that it's falling because it's being intelligently guided?
I wouldn't characterize it that way.
I'm not saying I'm trying to figure out what you're saying, because you're saying that you choose to believe there's a God because you're incredulous to the notion that without a God, everything's random. I don't see how you reach that conclusion in a logical way. Many things that happen in a predictable, non random way don't seem to be related to any intelligence, any entity, any. Like, can you draw the link between a rock falling consistently with the laws of logic and then a God existing?
Not. I also cannot
You're breaking up.
to yeah.
Try that again.
Not also logic can't make sense of my own existence. The fact that I'm conscious, there's like about 15 different things that I can't make sense of, but it seems to be the case.
You still kind of broke up the first half of that, so I missed it. But I heard you talk about your consciousness and stuff like that. And I'm not really asking about your consciousness. I'm talking about the notion of randomness. So maybe I need to understand what you mean by random then. Just generic form of random, and how God is a solution to non-random, whatever non-random is.
Okay, I gave you a series of different areas having to do with purpose, having to do with meaning, having to do with God. I give you a series of things that are all separated, right? And I gave you my stance on each individual one. I'm not suggesting that there's some correlation between the ones in which I put forth. So if I say that you can either believe that the universe is purposeful or meaningless or not purposeful, you can either believe the universe is ultimately has an explanation for it, i.e., God, or it is completely random plus chance. Right? Those are the dichotomies.
Well, purpose and random aren't, anathema. They're not. They're not opposites, right? I didn't hear you list anything that was random. That's what's weird. That's why I'm having a difficult time understanding what you mean by God is a solution for non-random. Like if you're going to say God is a solution for non-random, wouldn't it be prudent for you to appeal to random things? And like what those random things are versus non-random things?
I didn't say random. I said the universe is either absurd or it's not absurd. The universe either is meaningful or it's not meaningful. Either God exists or God does not exist. That's what I said.
You said random a few times now. Are
Right.
you backpedaling from random? I mean, that's fine if you're just clarifying and random's just not a good word. That's okay, but you led with random and then you
Oh, you're talking
said
about
random last time.
either the universe is. You're talking about time plus chance. That comment.
Well, I don't see anything insofar as random. I'm not drawing the same link as you are.
Well, there's two definitions of random. Randomness in the sense that it's absurd, which can be analogous or identical, or a randomness in the sense that there's no definite pattern. Right? Those are the two notions of randomness that we could be talking about.
Well, which one are you talking about?
In the sense of no cause, no reason, whimsical.
Yeah, again, I'm okay. I guess you're clarifying what you mean by random here, but how is anything the universe does non-random in the whimsical sense?
Well, some serious scientists believe, due to quantum mechanics, that the universe, by its very nature, is random. That there are intrinsic properties that exist that are non-random or acausal. They just pop into existence for no cause, uncause. That would be a notion of randomness. I don't. That's strange credulity for me, and it seems to be absurd.
Well, it's fallacious to appeal to quantum mechanics in this way. There's no relationship between quantum mechanics and, say, the realm we live in. There's not even a math to explain it. There are certainly phenomena that are consistent with things that we consider quantum. But again, the mathematical explanations for that are inconsistent with observation, right? So the things that appear random in the quantum realm cannot overlay into our normal sense experience of the universe, right? What the universe is. Uh,
Is
Quantum,
that your
the realm of
opinion, or
quantum.
is
No,
that
this
what
is
the
the
science
case.
is at? Oh,
That
okay.
this is
Can you cite me a reference because I
well,
haven't ever
yeah,
heard it explained
yeah,
that way.
I can. You'll just have to listen. Um, Quantum physicists, are actually working on the theory, and it'll be called the theory of everything, to explain the relationship between quantum mechanics and macro scale things, like what we observe as the universe, like atoms and up. There is no mathematical relationship between the two. They're two entirely different explanations.
Is that a problem or is that not a problem? The fact
Yeah,
that we
it's
can live in a
entirely a
universe
problem.
where there exist two different explanations of the same phenomenon.
Yeah, it's entirely problematic because, like I said, it leads to fallacious lines of reasoning, like your consciousness, or things like gravity, or even huge scale things like stars and singularities that may exist as black holes. These things are not quantum. These things, everything that we experience and that we've discussed so far, is non-quantum. And you're saying that your concern here is your incredulity, and why you're, prone to believing in God solves this non-random thing for you, where it solves the problem of randomness, right? And so that's why I asked you, okay, what's random then? And you then cited quantum mechanics, right? But none of the things that we could, like, your purpose, for example, that's not from the realm of quantum. That's not a quantum phenomena. Consciousness is not a quantum phenomena, right? So using the quantum, which is a completely different realm of mathematics, um, it's just fallacious. It's a non sequitur.
Well, I'm not. If I was in fact doing that, I guess I would agree with you. But I'm not doing that. I'm just pointing out a series of different propositions that I either affirm or I do not affirm. Like the universe either is meaningful or is not meaningful. The universe is either purposeful or is not purposeful. Either the universe has a cause or it doesn't have a cause. Either God exists or God doesn't exist. Those are the series of propositions that I can accept or I can decline to accept for a variety of reasons. So I laid out where I fall on all those various questions. That isn't to say that there aren't all sort of they can't all be tied in together on a wider explanation. But as far as what you said with quantum mechanics, the explanation that you've given about quantum mechanics, that these are two different distinct explanations, just because they're explaining what happens on very small scales doesn't mean that that doesn't dictate what happens on very large scales. There isn't That isn't to say that they aren't connected or they're different in some sense. It's just a different level of analysis.
Yeah. Look, all right. So let me be careful and clear in what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that there isn't a relationship between quantum mechanics and, we'll say, macro mechanics, right? Just for simplicity. What I'm saying is there's no clear delineation of the relationship. And furthermore, right? So table that idea, that fact, that's a fact, right? Because the theory of everything is yet to be a theory. It's the hypothesis of everything. There is, under that, right, our ignorance of the realm of quantum as it is, right? So what, not dealing with the quantum versus macro, but just dealing with the quantum. There are certain principles that we label as random because we don't have the mathematics to explain it, right? But that's still in the realm of ignorance, right? These are just hypotheses being thrown out there, like, anything like these, being able to predict the location of the appearance of a virtual particle. That for us is random, right? There's no mathematics that covers that. They just seem to randomly pop into our universe and then pop out. But that doesn't mean, again, this goes on to what you're saying, that doesn't mean that that virtual particle is popping in at random. It just means we don't have an explanation for it, and so we are assuming it's random, right? So that's why I said it's fallacious to appeal to quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics is a very, there's a lot of undiscovered territory in there, right? It doesn't seem meaningful to appeal to quantum mechanics as a reason to explain what you were talking about insofar as random, right? Nothing about the universe that you have described is consistent with the concept of random. That your God would explain.
Well, I'm not suggesting any of that. I just gave you my two construals of what it means for things to be random, acausal, or without a definite pattern. That was my two ideas of random. And the case in which I use it was the idea that things are acausal. And I gave you one such example where there are certain physicists, scientists in quantum mechanics which believe that certain things operate that way. That's just the way the universe is, and we just have to accept it according to their observations or their interpretation of the data. So it's not really what I believe. I'm just, where scientists are at this point, where specific scientists are at, because they all don't agree, obviously. So, but what would be do you even believe that in a notion of randomness?
No. But let's look at one thing. Let's focus on one thing. Purpose. You're saying that it is God that provides purpose. And it seems to me like you're suggesting that the other side of that is some kind of randomness or something like that. Care to elaborate?
No, I'm just giving you a series of propositions or, conditionals. Either the universe is random or it's not random, right? Either the universe is meaningful or it's not meaningful. Either God exists or God does not exist, right? Either the universe is rational or it's not rational. Either it's intelligible or it's not intelligible. Where do you fall on those series of propositions?
Well, I don't. That again, I don't like to go down that road because I'm not a quantum physicist. You're not a quantum physicist. Even quantum physicists aren't quantum physicists. Even the most famous quantum physicist, Feynman, or you could say one of the most famous quantum physicists, Feynman, cautioned against making any knowledge statements about the realm of the quantum. And so I don't even really give a shit about it. Right? I mean, I don't live in the quantum. Right? No one lives in the quantum. We're all products of macroscopic things. And it's true, in things like the Large Hadron Collider and stuff like that, we're trying to figure those things out. But apart from that, I don't live in an experience of randomness. Nothing is random for me. Like I wouldn't even know where to begin to talk about random shit happening.
Well, the question doesn't; those questions don't cease to exist whether you care about them or not. I think they're relevant questions that you deserve an answer if you're a serious thinker, right? If you want to construct a worldview, I think it's worth answering. But yeah, I'm not too keen on talking about quantum mechanics because I don't know a lot about it. But that's some of the understanding I have of where they're at, right? So there's these ideas that there exist virtual particles. There's these ideas that things can be one discrete object can be in multiple places at one time, and all these ideas. How do you make sense of that? I don't know.
Yeah, but again, you're ignoring the issue that I'm raising is that it's nonsensical to appeal to it. Right? Based on what you just said last time on microphone, it's nonsense to appeal to it. Therefore, we should just appeal to what we're more familiar with, right? Even what we're more familiar with, there's still a whole world of debate and conversation around like purpose, consciousness, some of the things that you listed there. It seems to me like you're making the assertion that without a God, things like purpose and consciousness happen at random.
I didn't say that actually, but do you believe that, or do you believe the opposite of that? In the sense that, do you believe that we don't need a God and we can have purpose? We don't need a God and we can have meaning. We don't need a God. We can have morality. Do you believe that? I'm certainly not suggesting what you're saying I am, but but if you want to bring that up, I guess I'll ask a question.
Well, I go down the road of I don't have any need for that hypothesis. I don't even know what a God is. I'm agnostic, right? I don't know what would or wouldn't change about the universe, given whether it exists or it doesn't exist, right? So I don't incorporate it in my explanations.
Gotcha. Let me try to provide some links for you and see if that'll help.
Links for what? What you claim God is?
Not necessarily what I claim, just
Oh, okay. So what someone claims God is?
sources. established
I
definition,
don't.
irreparable sources.
I don't even know how
Would
to.
that
How would you
suffice?
do that? I don't.
I don't know.
I
It's something
disagree with
called
that
Google it.
concept.
I'm
Fundament.
gonna Google
What?
it. Something
No,
called Google.
I'm trying to explain to you, you fucking smart alecky son of a bitch. You're going to present me what? An authority on what the God is?
That's normally how it works in debate settings. We provide references and
No, 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 no.
try to cite sources and evidence and
No,
definitions.
sources are fine. I'm asking about an authority. Are you going to post for me an authoritative position on the concept of God?
I don't see how that would be relevant whether I did that or not.
It's relevant because, for one, presumably this thing exists. Presumably this thing has characteristics, and those characteristics are discerned. Presumably some methodology was used to discern those characteristics, and some level of testing was applied to the methodology that discerned the characteristics of the thing that exists, and thereby establishing a route to authority. If you're just going to post some fucking person's opinion, I don't give a shit about their opinion, because I'm not asking about opinion, and I'm not concerned about opinion. The nature of a thing isn't subject to opinions.
So you're talking about the ontology of God. Is that what you're asking? Do you want a definition or you want the ontology?
I would want the ontology of your claims, your position, your beliefs, and assertions about God.
Ah, okay. I'll try to provide that to you.
You see, I mean, I've been around the internet a long time. I've heard claims about gods for a long time. Having access to a rich or a plethora of God claims isn't a problem. Having access to what I laid out before, the nature of its existence, its characteristics, how those characteristics are discerned, the any authority that we can put on a person's claims, that's always been the problem, right? Whenever I put that burden out there that, I don't want your opinion about the thing that exists, uh, it it just shuts down the whole conversation, because there isn't any, right? And that's problematic for people that are claiming a thing exists. So that's why I'm asking you. You're the one who's claiming there's this God thing, and you're the one claiming that there are certain either random or non-random things that we can talk about, namely consciousness, purpose, things like that. I don't see those things as random, right? And so I'm just asking you to explain to me how purpose is random.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things said there. I certainly didn't suggest that purpose is random. As I said before, I don't want to repeat myself, but I gave you a series of propositions, and you can either be for it or against it in the way in which I framed it: purpose or non purpose, meaning or no meaning, in reference to all of reality, obviously, right? God or no God, absurdity or, I don't know, you would say non absurdity, or rationality would be more appropriate. This is all in reference to reality itself. And there are some people, and this is why I brought up quantum mechanics, essentially to suggest that the universe is uncaused, or that there can exist uncaused events, or that discrete objects can be in multiple places at one time, is absurd. And it would, obviously have implications. I don't know if you know what the principle of explosion is when it comes to ideas. Um, and so what I'm saying is, where I stand as far as those questions are concerned, it seems to me to make sense that the universe is not absurd, right? To suggest it's absurd or unintelligible at any level, would obviously have, create all types of problems in your reasoning. Now, as far as purpose is concerned, in order to have a purpose, as far as the universe is concerned, there would have to exist, obviously, some mind which intended those purposes. I'm not suggesting that I know that. I'm just saying where I stand on those issues.
So it sounds to me like you're going with some kind of presuppositionalism, or at least you're presupposing um, the universe has purpose, for example. I mean, I haven't heard you provide any evidence that the universe has purpose, or that there is a purpose to the universe. So it seems to me like you're starting with that as a presupposition. I don't know why you would do that, right? Like, why would you start with the presupposition that the universe has purpose? What indicates that for you?
It's a matter of trying to square the universe having no purpose, and that would entail, of course, that it was brought about by random chance plus time. Trying to square that with, it being purposeful would be something that I find untenable, right? So there's only two possibilities: either the universe is without no purpose, which would entail that it was just brought about by random happenstance, no rhyme or reason. It just came into existence or always existed, which obviously has problems as well, versus it being purposeful. One argument obviously would be the fine tuning argument, which I don't think is the best argument, but it's better than suggesting the universe came into existence from nothing, right? Or the idea that the universe always existed, which is inconsistent with where science it seems to be going, which is Big Bang cosmology.
Oh, well, I mean, science has gone to Big Bang cosmology because that's the logical reverse of the expansion. But anywhere from, you could say, the origin of our universe, I'll say our, just, not asserting that there's a multiverse, but kind of tipping my hat towards the notion of a multiverse. Anywhere we can talk in an authoritative way, in a meaningful way, in a way that we could demonstrate anything like that about the universe, it's all non-random events, right? If you go from Planck era forward, right? So if you go from, what is it, 10 to the minus 30 seconds or something post Big Bang to today, that's all non-random, right? There's mathematical explanations for all of that shit, right? And I don't see where this randomness comes from. Like the formation, for example, nucleosynthesis. It's not random, right? Taking hydrogen all the way up to iron, that's not random, right? The assembly of a planet from that material, from that kind of debris from a star, is not random. Chemistry is not random. Biochemistry, again, not random. None of this shit's random. So that's why it seems to me like a basic presuppositional argument that you're putting forward here, that the universe is random chance plus time. Like there's no randomness there. Like, what is, when you're saying random chance plus time, because you're saying it's either random chance plus time or it's God. You're trying to establish a dichotomy here. I don't see that as a dichotomy. I see that as a false dichotomy, because you're not establishing how it's dichotomous, right? For one, God is just a baseless assertion so far on your part. And two, the other half of that dichotomy is random chance plus time. Neither one of those are established.
No, these are two logical possibilities that I'm constructing as per logic, right? There can be only two possible explanations for the universe existence. Either it came into existence, and I guess you can say but I'm
Well,
talking about as
hold
far as,
on,
okay, let me put it
pause.
in this. Either we're talking
You're
about an
you're you're
efficient
wrong
cause
about
or a physical cause. That I'll
you're
frame it
you're
that way.
wrong. Let me just clear this up. It's a dichotomy isn't either God exists or randomness happens.
Yeah,
A
God, either
dichotomy,
God
a
exists or
true
God does not
dichotomy,
exist. Yes,
right? Either the universe is random or it's not random, right?
yes, I
That would
understand.
be a dichotomy. That's not what you're saying. You're saying either God or random.
No, 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 no. I was saying that either God exists or God does not exist, but that was a separate thing. As far as either they're being a cause or they're not being a cause. I'm talking about the entailment, right? We can pick apart what it would mean for there not to be a cause. So there's two types of cause. There would be an efficient cause and a physical cause. Are you familiar with an efficient?
I don't, not off the top of my head, but we can already rule out random chance plus time. So we know it's not random chance. Now, I don't know if we haven't discussed time or not, but I would just go ahead and insert time, right? Because we would either say either time or no time. I hope we can both agree that time exists, but I don't agree that it's random chance, right? Like we can rule random chance out. I don't see random chance happening. That doesn't exist as far as I can tell. So that would be a false dichotomy then, right? If we were to say, if we were to go with the random chance side of things, right? It just makes more sense to say non-random stuff plus time.
All right, let me put it this way. I can say the universe either has a purpose or it does not have a purpose, but the entailment of the universe not having a purpose would entail that God doesn't exist. You get what I'm saying? So these things would have entailments.
Well, how how do we go about approaching the concept of whether something has a purpose or not? I'm not looking for a definitive answer here because I mean it's just
Well,
gonna
we would have to define what it
multiple
means
answers.
by we would just have to we would have to logically define what it means to have a purpose, and would this be possible, and does this make sense, and if we conclude that, then we would
We
try
us
to
humans
discern.
or the universe?
No, no, no. It's irrelevant. I'm just saying how we would go about doing that. We would have to establish, we would have to agree that purposes exist, right? The notion of a purpose exists in some sense. That's
Well,
one thing.
no, hold on. We're talking about two different things, then, Ace. I mean, the purpose for this charging cord that I'm about to plug into my phone because it just beeped me that it's dying is a different topic than whether or not the universe has purpose. And you were earlier talking about the universe having purpose. Finding purpose within the universe is different than the whole thing of like, it's like saying the universe is conscious because we're conscious. Well, we're part of the universe, right? We're conscious. So therefore the universe, well, no, not really, right? The universe itself is a greater organism when we're just tiny little organelles inside the universe, right? We're just little parts of the universe. So it's the composition fallacy, right? That, I mean, we can establish there is purpose. What I'm saying is we can establish that there is purpose in the universe, but that's not indicative of the universe itself having purpose.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting from that would somehow, because we have purposes, then that would imply the universe has a purpose. I'm not. I'm just giving you the dichotomy, right? And you would have to just say where you stand on that dichotomy: purpose or not purpose, meaning or no meaning, right? Absurdity or things make sense, intelligibility or non unintelligibility. So you would have to, logically conclude one or the other, right? Or you can just say you don't know, right?
Well, I mean, it's not trivial, or it's trivial for me to agree that purpose exists within the universe. It's not a contentious point.
Right. So purpose exists, consciousness exists, intelligibility exists, rationality exists. Okay, and the science that we have suggests that the universe seems to have some type of beginning, came into existence. So the idea that it's
Well, that
eternal.
depends on the model.
Right, right. But I'm talking about the best that the best reasons we have, the best evidence we have. Whereas,
Well, again, that depends on the model. There is no best explanation for the origins of the universe. There are multiple explanations, all equally valid, and all equally invalid as well.
I don't. I don't think they're equally valid or invalid. Some are more plausible and some are less plausible.
Well, like give an example. I would see like M theory being as plausible and
Multiverse
implausible
hypothesis is ad hoc,
as
and
hang on,
you can't.
as string theory, right? Like those are two hypotheses for the origin of the universe, and both have merit and both have weaknesses.
But if you're appealing to simplicity, if you're appealing to Occam's razor, and you're following that line of reasoning, then obviously you want to pick the simplest explanation.
And which one's simpler?
That the universe had some type of beginning.
How is that simpler? That you just created an extra
How is
problem.
that simpler than postulating a world ensemble, which involves?
It's not, but you said it was simpler.
Well, it's simpler by definition. It doesn't postulate.
It's not. It's the same regress as with M theory and string theory and multiple universe theory, right? Positing an unexplained possible explanation creates the same problem.
Saying that there exists one cause is more simple than saying that there's an infinite series of unending causes.
What? That's
Okay,
special pleading.
Okay, so how's that special pleading?
An uncaused cause is special pleading.
Okay, so you believe that the universe necessarily has to have an infinite series of causes. Is that what you're saying in effect?
No.
Okay, so but that's a binary sort of thing there. Either you're saying that or you're not.
No, what's going on is you're appealing to ignorance. I'm not. I'm questioning you about your appeal to ignorance, and you're trying to pigeonhole me into accepting the opposite.
I'm talking about Occam's razor, right? Operating within that framework.
Both models have
saying that
problems.
Postulating one explanation versus
Ace.
Yep.
We're talking past each other. Both models have problems. There's a problem with infinite regress. Logically, there's a problem, or at least people appeal to problems with infinite regress. And then people also present problems when they talk about uncaused causes, right? Neither one of them is a cogent, coherent, all explanation thing, right? It's there are many problems with both sides.
It doesn't matter. We're just talking about which one would be more simpler than the reason.
Neither.
Well, you have to explain why you believe that, because I just explained that the whole ideal of Occam's razor is appealing to making the least amount of assumptions and trying to provide an explanation, like the universe, the explanation of the universe, well, it always existed, it was always here, or it came into existence by one cause, rather than 30 trillion causes that keep causing other causes. You see what I'm saying? I'm still operating.
No, I get you. There are problems certainly with discussing an infinite regress. How do we get to any particular time on an infinite time scale? True. That's a problem. I don't have an answer for that. But on the other hand, Ace, appealing to an an uncaused cause violates the concept of causality as special pleading, right? So that's a logical problem too. Both of them, I've appealed to both of them having problems that we can discuss in conversation. So if we're appealing to Occam's razor, we don't just get to say, well, Occam's razor says go with the uncaused cause, right? Because Occam's razor would then ask, well, what about the special pleading, right? So if there are two unexplains on the other side of this wall we have come to, right? Occam's razor is not going to help us here. We would have to flesh out the nature of an uncaused cause, right? Like how long has an uncaused cause been around? Would be a reasonable question to ask, right? And if the uncaused cause was around for a finite period of time, is that what you're arguing? Are you arguing that a finite uncaused cause?
Let's just use another example. Let's say we wanted to say, who stole your car, right? That's what we're trying to provide an explanation for that. What would be the best explanation? That, I don't know, stole your car, or there's an infinite series of robots that stole your car.
Wait, what?
I'm appealing to Occam's razor. Let's say that somebody stole your car. You're trying to provide an
This is
explanation.
disanalogous. God isn't a somebody.
Really
An
not.
uncaused cause is not a somebody.
That's irrelevant.
No, it's not irrelevant because you're trying to draw the comparison for explanation. You're saying an infinite series of robots. Okay, well that's analogous to an infinite series of events. And then you're saying a person, right? And that would technically be analogous to an uncaused cause. But people are not uncaused cause, so the analogy breaks down right there, and that's a fundamental breakdown in the analogy, right? It's not going to help me explain anything if you just get me to pretend that the uncaused cause is like a person when people aren't uncaused causes. Like an infinite chain of robots is analogous to an infinite causal chain of events that ultimately one of the chains, one of the links in that chain of events led to the origin of the universe, right? That's disanalogous. So I say we just focus on the nature of an uncaused cause, and you tell me how long has an uncaused cause been around?
I don't know the answer to that, but that still wouldn't. That still have nothing to
Well,
do with
you would
whether or
need
not
to
it's
know that.
simple. It's
You
simple.
would have to, Ace. You would have to have
What
the
would
answer
make a
to that.
simple explanation would be whether or not uh, it's parsimonious, whether or not it's ad hoc, whether or not it's
Ace,
it doesn't assume it doesn't compound
Ace,
assumptions. That's what would make it simple. There's
Ace.
obvious reasons.
If you're going to object to it, an infinite infinite chain of causal events because of an infinite time scale, thereby prohibiting any moment on that time scale from happening, right? Because there would be an infinite amount of time preceding any particular event or coming after any particular event, then necessarily your logical objection would have to entail something that isn't on an infinite timescale. So you would have to have that answer, right? Because that's your
Damn.
primary objection, right? So the uncaused cause has to be finite. Otherwise, you're making the same objection. If the infinite cause was around, if the infinite uncaused cause was around for an infinite amount of time, how did the uncaused cause get on a particular point in the uncaused infinite time scale to do anything? Because there would have been an infinite amount of time on that uncaused cause time frame before it made the universe, right? So it's the same problem, thereby, like I said, Occam's razor not helping us.
That's conceivable. I have to think about it further. I think I know where you're going with this in the sense that if we're considering something was uncaused, like they make an example of this, certain people that deal with this stuff and try to analyze it, whether or not um, something that was existing from eternity past, that would that entail that necessarily that everything from that existing moment would exist from eternity past as well, like the 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 very nature of something that has an eternal existence, can it bring about temporal things which be and not be, come into existence and go out of existence. So there is a problem with it. So a lot of these concepts are fraught with problems, such as infinite regress, such as things which are eternal. I'm not saying that there's not problems there, but that has nothing to do with uh, applying Occam's razor to assess whether or not something is simple or whether or not something's extravagant in an explanation. Those are separate issues. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I would say, look, if we're gonna, because we have to ignore this problem of infinite regress because it exists on both frames of reference, right? So let's just ignore it. Occam's razor would say the simpler explanation, and the way I would argue it, the simpler explanation is an unbroken chain of events, right? Because we are familiar with a chain of events, right? A chain of events is meaningful, right? This causes that, right? That they're parsed out, that we can, the domino hit the domino, hit the domino, hit the domino, right? It doesn't matter how many dominoes you put up, the domino is going to hit the domino. We're familiar with a causal chain of events. We also are familiar that the first domino hitting the second domino onto the 100th domino, right? If there's 100 dominoes here, are individual instances, right? They're individual, right? So we're familiar with this causal chain of events. What we're not familiar is considering the effects of the first domino the same as that it's not a chain, right? That it's not indivisible, or that it is indivisible. No, I was right the first time. That it's not indivisible causal chains, right? We're not familiar with that. There's no model of dominoes that you could explain that it's a singular event, right? We understand everything we understand is causal chain of event. If we're going to talk about an uncaused cause, and if we're going to, going back to not ignoring the infinite chain, right? It takes more explanation, right? Because we're not familiar with a singular event being infinite, right? We're not familiar with any of that shit. We are familiar with causal chains of event. So if we're forced to assume whether or not it's an infinite chain of events or an infinite block event, Occam's razor would say go with the chain of events and not the block of event. Because that just, look, the problem of infinite is consistent with both models. But you would be introducing a new problem, an extra problem, saying that there's this singular thing of a single event that wasn't caused. That's new. That's extra information. That's inconsistent with anything. It has no analog. Right? There's nothing analogous to that. There's nothing related to that. So Occam's, the simplest explanation is an infinite causal chain of events.
When you're postulating an explanation for the universe, you can either postulate one explanation, that it was brought into existence by a god, or it always existed, or you can postulate that an infinite sequence of events brought the universe into existence. Those would be your plausible explanations, and amongst those, you would have to determine which fits within Occam's razor.
The causal chain, right? Like, think about it. Let's say there's a God, and let's say it's this block infinite timescale thing, right? It would still have to act, right? It would still have to do, right? And I would expect that what it does would come in phases, in a chain of events, right? It's how I couldn't even begin to conceptualize the origin of the universe happening as a singular thing, right? Just this one thing, right? It is, I mean, because now you've made two, right? Because before the universe, there was this one block thing called God on an infinite time scale, but it's not a causal chain. There's no chain there. It's one link, right? It's a single link. And then it made the universe being link two. That's a causal chain of events. Just, it's only got two links though. One link is infinitely long. The second link is finite, but it's still a causal chain of events.
Well, there's obviously, I know what you're getting at, that no matter how you slice it, whether you say something is eternal or whether you say something is uh, temporal, I mean, finite, I guess you would say, or non-eternal, you're always going to be left with a sequence of events unfolding, right? But the whole idea is that that sequence itself comes to some definite endpoint where you don't postulate anything else after that.
Would you mean before that?
Yeah, before that, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with anything like that. So if I had to go with Occam's razor, I would just say an infinite chain of events. Because what's the difference? Look,
Well, it has a problem, right? In the sense that you're you're never quite able to explain the whole existence of the universe, right?
the problem transcends
You're always
both.
having to go back to an antecedent cause to explain it, and you never quite arrive at a
Both
total
have that
explanation
problem.
of existence. No,
Both.
in the case, no, it doesn't. In the case of there being an absolute um, cause, that's the stopping point.
No, look at it this way. Look at it this way. If I asked you to conceptualize just the idea of sitting here and starting at the number 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, on ad infinitum, right? You never stop. That's a meaningful proposition, right? Your brain can work on that scale. You could say, well, it may take a long time, but when I'm at the number, 762 million, I can just add 1 to that. That's easy to do. You can conceptualize going forward, or even using a negative time scale or a negative number scale and going -1, -2, -3. That's something you can conceptualize. If I asked you, Ace, to conceptualize the set of infinite numbers, your brain can't do that. Your brain can not conceptualize the infinite set, right? You can't do that. You can think of terms going into infinity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but your brain cannot conceptualize an infinite set. And that's what you're trying to say, right? When you say uncaused cause or God, God is the infinite set, right? It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is all encompassing, right? How are you even conceptualizing anything there?
I don't quite understand the question. Are you suggesting that we can't conceptualize a whole number or uh, a concept that is all encompassing, that's inconceivable?
Right.
Even
Well, yes and no. You're kind of mixing terms here. Again, you can conceptualize that. You just add a 5, and you add a 6, and you add a 7, you add an 8. If I asked you to do that, that's something you can do, and that represents the causal chain of events, right? You may not know what's after that number without the W, right? You may not know that, right? I might have to sit here for a really long time. Let's say you counted up to that number, right? You may never get there because it's a lot of fucking numbers, right? But you can conceptualize what it's like to parse out each number along that infinite chain of numbers. You'll never get to the end. You'll never get to the end, but all that you need to do is realize that you just add another number. That's it. That's all it takes. If I asked you to conceptualize the set of all numbers, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? That's not. You can understand this right here. Let me type it. Well, I think set works this way. You can conceptualize this, but this is truncated, right? That's a truncated concept of infinity. That is not an all-encompassing set of numbers.
well, they have concepts in set theory that do exactly that, and people
No,
do
that's not what I'm saying.
conceptualize it. It's one
I
thing
I
from
just
saying whether or
I
not
just
they can.
conceptualized infinity, right? I conceptualized the concept of infinity with the bracket 1, 2, 3 dot 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 bracket. That means an infinite set. But what I'm saying is there's how long do you want me to sit out here and type numbers to represent the infinite set of numbers? It's a ridiculous proposition, right? So we just shorthand it with putting brackets around it. But literally, there's no way for a brain to conceptualize every single number, right? You understand that? There's no way to conceptualize every number.
Yeah, I don't believe that an actual infinite is possible. But as far as a working concept of infinity, I'm not sure about that.
Right. So I think we may be on common ground that it's impossible to conceptualize an infinite set, right? Not the truncated version like I put in the brackets, but I'm saying it's impossible to conceptualize the infinite set of numbers. It's possible to conceptualize an endless set, meaning 1 and then 2 and then 3. You can always just add a number, right? We can go down that road, right? Because that's how numbers are set up. You just get to a 0, then add a 1, right? And then a 2, and then a 3. Right? That's all you got to
So
do.
what are you getting at?
what I'm getting at is that we can conceptualize in principle an infinite chain of causal events, in that the number scale that I'm talking about, counting from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, is analogous to an infinite regress, an infinite causal chain of events. We may never get to the number this, right, as we're counting. We may never get to that number, but we know all we have to do is add another 1. That's it. That's all we need to know of the concept. So it's easier to conceptualize an infinite causal chain of events because you just add one more link.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's
Hold on,
necessarily the case.
hold on, hold on.
Our brains, because of
Just
evolution.
hang on. It's not the same though with the God thing, because this one chain is the set of all numbers. It is like conceptualizing all the numbers at one time, thinking all the numbers at one time.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure the terms you're using are appropriate when you talk about our ability to conceptualize infinity, because they obviously have means to do that. You know, certain the little sort of fish-like symbols in mathematics and so forth to do exactly that. To say whether or not somebody can hold in one's mind a sequence of numbers is a different thing, right? It's just a matter of memory. It's a matter of holding all that information in your head. It's another thing to say whether or not it's even possible, right? The very notion is even possible. So to ask somebody can they do the impossible would be absurd. So you would have to be very specific to what you're actually saying.
Let me try to make this simpler in concept and in practice. Let's just say humanity has only figured out how to count to 9, right? That's the farthest anybody's ever counted, was 9. No one's counted to 10. We've only counted to 9. And you and I are sitting down, and I'm the one who invented the concept of counting to 10, right? And we're discussing, hey, you know how we can count to 9? And I say, yeah, but we can keep going. And you go, well, how? How do we keep going? And I show you, I reveal this to you. You just go 10. And then you're like, wow, that's amazing. Well, that's the end, right? And I say, no, you can keep going. You're like, how? How do you keep going? And I go, you just go 11, right? So let's not worry about huge ass numbers. Let's just keep it simple here, right? So humanity's only figured out to 9. We're discussing how do we go beyond 9? How do we go beyond 10? How do we go beyond 11? And I just teach you, all you have to do is add one more number to the set. You just keep going, right? That in principle is a causal chain of events. If we reverse, if we regress, and you say, well, what caused this? And I say, well, a link caused that. And you say, well, what caused that link? And I say, well, a link caused that. Well, what caused that link? Well, a link caused that, right? All you have to do to conceptualize this model is just to know that whenever you get to a link, all you have to do is add another link. Links are simple. We see links in our face all the time. There's a 5, right? There's a link. Here's another link. We see the links.
There's some problem with that as well.
I'm not saying there's not a problem. I'm talking about the difference between you understanding a single link. Ace, I'm trying to get you to understand there's a conceptualization problem when you're talking about a link that encompasses all links. That is not there's nothing to relate there. It would be like if I said, no, you can go beyond 9. And you're like, how? And I say, you conceptualize all things beyond 9.
When we conceptualize the number 1, that can be divided up into an infinite sequence.
Yes.
As well, right? So
yes, but we're talking about Occam's razor here.
I understand that, but
you're
suggesting
in
that
in Occam's razor, Ace, it requires more assumption to postulate an infinite link, a single link that is infinite, than just another link. Another link is not conceptually problematic as a single link that is infinite in its linkiness.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that because I really can't say anything more than what I said.
Roger that.